Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alicia and I am the owner of Alicia Be Creative. In today's tutorial we're going to be doing a split cup, but instead of using glitter and vinyl we're actually going to be using alcohol inks on one side and Arteza's acrylic paint on the other. The theme behind today's cup is kind of a woman empowerment, woman motivational cup, and I am so pleased with how everything turned out. So of course, everything that I talk about in today's tutorial will be listed and linked in the description below, as well as a brand new discount code from Archon Mounts. My code is Alicia Be Creative, and that will save you 20% off at archon.com on your mount, which I use each and every time I put together a tutorial. All right, I feel like that's enough for us. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So I am starting with a 20-ounce tumbler. This is a skinny from Craft Haven. And what I'm doing is I'm just taking a strip of blue painter's tape and just trying to determine the halfway point that will split the tumbler in half. So one half of this cup is going to be all acrylic paint from Arteza, and the other half is going to be alcohol ink. What I am going to tell you is that this cup was just something I played with. I didn't have an idea in mind when I first started this cup. I didn't even know what I was going to put on this cup. I just knew I had these paints and I hadn't used them. I had spent money on them, bought them like months ago, and I hadn't used them. And I was like, I need to use these paints in like a fun way. Like, you know, what can I do with them? So I literally just took out some blues and purples. I got black and white on there, and I just decided, well, let's play on a tumbler and see what we come out with. So I'm gonna start with my darkest blue. So the darkest blue I have, I believe this is the, I think it's the Aquamarine blue or something like that. It's the darker blue. I'll list everything in the description. So again, I wasn't sure kind of what I wanted it to look like, but I did know that I wanted to make it some form of gradient from dark to light. So I'm starting with the darkest blue and then slowly moving to the royal blue, and then you'll see me throw some cobalt in there as well, which is the lightest of the blues. I didn't do the very bottom yet because I wasn't sure how I wanted that to blend. I knew that that would probably be the purple, but I wanted to start with the blues because I knew that was going to take up the majority of the tumbler before I worried about the darkest color on the bottom. So what I love about these paints too, and I didn't even mention, is that these paints they like literally glide on like so easy, literally like butter, so easy and simple. So the bottom there, I just put it's a violet, it's a purple violet, and you'll see as I'm mixing up back to the top, as I'm taking a little bit of that darkest blue, the violet, and just kind of again mixing it. And so what I mean by mixing is I'm just taking that little bit of paint and starting in that true color spot and then moving my brush up stroke by stroke. And this I feel like helps really to blend the colors so that you don't have to worry about there being some very obvious lines for when you switch from color to color. So I didn't have a very bright blue, so I just mixed a little bit of white with the lighter cobalt blue that I had, just so that I could create kind of that light sky blue that you'll see at the very tip top of the tumbler. You'll also see me then incorporate the black with a little bit of the purple, like a very, very, very smidgen amount of purple or smidgen amount of black to be able to cover the bottom, because I wanted there to be some kind of darkness there too. You know, as I was putting this together, it kind of very much reminded me of like what like the deepest parts of the ocean would look like. So I was pretty pleased to see how these colors really came together, and I even surprised myself because I'm not someone who uses paint very often, and when I use like regular acrylic paint that you can just buy from, you know, Walmart or whatever, I'm never really happy with how things come out. So when I got these Arteza paints and they literally glided on the tumbler like butter, and then I was able to create this gorgeous gradient, I was like, I don't know why I'm not painting Picassos at this point. Anyway, so I'm going to finish up the bottom a little bit, add a little bit more darkness down there, and then I basically leave it. I kind of realized that I needed to stop before I went too far because we all know once you go too far, there's no turning back. So I decided that I just wanted to leave it as is. I'm going to dry this overnight, and then we'll get into the alcohol ink side of the tumbler. All right, so I have let this tumbler dry overnight, and actually I think I let this dry actually for a couple days. This was definitely one of those cups where once I started that side, because I didn't really have an idea or thought for the tumbler, this is one of those tumblers that kind of just sat on my desk and in my workroom and space, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it. So I decided to try and incorporate some alcohol inks on the other side, because I didn't really have a vinyl or a quote or something, really cute that I could think of otherwise to go on that other side. So I figured I would use alcohol inks and try and create that same gradient on the flip side. So I will list every single alcohol ink that I did use on this tumbler, as well as the Arteza paints in the description below. Forgive me if I missay any of the colors, because there's a lot of blue, a lot of purple happening. So I may missay one of the colors. So I started definitely with the Aquamarine color, and then ended up adding some of that Monsoon. The Monsoon color was probably the color I didn't necessarily need to add. And the reason why I say that is because it's more of a green gray than it is a blue. I mean, the label's blue, but once you look at it next to like Aquamarine or the Indigo color that I'm adding on right now, it definitely doesn't quite match, if that makes sense. So, I am literally just trying to create a gradient that is from dark to light. And so once I had started with these blues, I was a little worrisome because I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to blend once I put this indigo color on, because it is such a very bright, gorgeous blue, but it didn't match my Aquamarine and Monsoon below it. So I did get a little worrisome, but with a little patience and a little bit of back and forth, I was able to finally get those colors to blend. So I'm just kind of working through this area again with the Monsoon and the Aquamarine, which I decided would be that second layer. And then I kind of leave that Monsoon and move into just Aquamarine. The top two colors are going to be the purple. And the two purple alcohol inks that I used were Purple Twilight and Amethyst. Amethyst was the other one. So alcohol inks are really fun to use. You do need some patience. I say patience because there is times where you kind of just want to throw in the towel, especially when things aren't blending the way that you envision them in your head. But if you kind of go into alcohol inks without an idea, and you kind of just pick some colors or pick a palette, if you will, like I have, to play with, they really can be fun to work with. I mean, I spent a lot of time working on this side, and the reason why I spent so much time working on this side was not necessarily to perfect it in any way, shape, or form, but I was just kind of amazed and surprised at how well things were starting to come together. I assume this is kind of like what, painting a Picasso would feel like in the sense of just seeing it kind of come to fruition. And again, it may not even have been what you envisioned in your mind, but when you just kind of go into any crafting project, especially with tumblers, when you just kind of have free range to just create something new, it is fun and it is very cool and unique and exciting to be able to create something brand new. And you really do surprise yourself with how amazing some things can come out. So again, now I'm going into my two purple colors, which again were Purple Twilight and Amethyst. I love these two colors together. They just blended so gorgeously on the top of that. Really did kind of pull the whole gradient on this one side of the tumbler together. And so I just go back and forth once I've gotten to the top of that. And what I'm doing is I'm taking those makeup wedges that, again, got from the dollar store. So don't be hating on the dollar store, y'all. Y'all can get some good stuff from the dollar store, for real, though. Anyway, so I'm going back and forth, and what I'm doing is I'm just carrying the color above it to the row below it to kind of create a better blend, to make it look like this is something you would see, on a painting out in the world, on a horizon, in the darkness, that kind of like skyline gradient, if you will. And it really was starting to resemble like a really, really pretty blue to purple gradient that really came out way better than I could have even ever envisioned, and definitely was surprised that it came from my hand at that. Okay, so this image I got off of Etsy, but unfortunately the shop is closed. So what I intended to do was to print this on clear waterslide and do a white vinyl, but it wouldn't print the white vinyl. So I just did a duplicate of the image and just made it gray. And you'll see why I'm going to do that here. The next thing I'm going to do is spray this with 2 times clear gloss spray before I move into putting on my first layer of waterslide. So now that we have clear sprayed our white water, or clear water slide, excuse me, I'm going to just be using lukewarm water that I just got from the tap, nothing special. It's just kind of, room temperature water. And what I'm going to be using is my silicone brush tool, and we're only going to be applying the gray water slide first. So I'm gonna cut my water slide down to size, and I'm going to kind of cut any excess white that I can sacrifice off that water slide as well. This just helps not having kind of pointed edges when you're applying a water slide. So I like to make all of my edges kind of rounded just so that you can't see the very edge of the clear water slide after you put on those layers of epoxy. So I'm going to kind of shape this, and then I am going to set that in my room temperature water so that we can go ahead and get started on applying the clear water slide to my tumbler. So I'm going to then take my hand and I'm going to put a little bit of water on my tumbler. And the reason why we're doing this is we want to create a slippery and movable enough, that's not really a word, obviously, but we want to create a canvas, if you will, for the water slide to stick to. If you try to do it on a completely dry tumbler, you're going to have a much harder time trying to get that water slide to adhere to your tumbler. So I have some paper towels there, which we're going to use after we're able to apply the water slide. And I'm going to tell you kind of a few of the tricks that I use when I am applying water slide to a cup. So first things first, definitely make sure you put water on top of your tumbler, as I just said, because when you don't, I'm telling you, you run into all types of crazy issues. The next thing is, when you are putting your water slide into the water, you're going to let that sit for probably 30 to 45 seconds. And the reason why you're going to do this is you want this to be ready to go, and the only way you're going to know it's ready to go is if it's literally sliding off of its backing. If you have to struggle to use your thumbs or your fingers to remove that water slide off, then it's not ready. So now that my water slide is ready, I then place it on the tumbler, keeping the backing on, and I'm going to place it directly onto my tumbler. I'm using my hand on top to kind of hold the water slide in place so that it doesn't slide all over the place. And then I very carefully pull the backing out from beneath it. So I know you really can't see on this clip where that water slide is because, again, it's gray. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to lighten that in order to get the next water slide to stick to that. So once I've gotten the backing removed, I'm going to take my silicone brush and I'm just going to very carefully squeegee out the water from under the water slide. You're going to make sure that you want to go over this a couple times and make sure that your water slide is flat, the edges are completely pressed down, and that there's no water under the water slide. The reason for this is you wouldn't want your water slide sliding all over, and as the water slide dries to your cup, it will shrink a little bit. And when it shrinks, if there's any water under there, it does create bubbles. And you don't want those bubbles because those are something that you'll see when you apply your epoxy. So I'm going to squeegee this out. Then I'm going to take my paper towel and just dab the rest of the excess water very carefully to not disturb or rip my clear water slide before I let this sit. Okay, so I have let my water slide sit for about an hour or so, and what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try to outline and fill in the image with some white alcohol ink. So the reason why I'm doing this is because I only like to use clear water slide. I really don't like the look of white water slide. It just creates a very weird sticker look that I just don't care for, and I didn't want there to be a lot of white background on this image. Normally I would have printed this same exact image but on white vinyl, but for whatever reason my Cricut was like, nope, not having it, can't print this image on a white vinyl, so I had to duplicate it in that gray color. So I thought I was coming up with a spectacular idea by coloring in the image with like paint, or what I'm using here, which is the white alcohol ink, and I think I nailed it almost. And I say almost because you are going to see I made a bit of a boo-boo when we go in to do the words, because I am not someone who is great at calligraphy. I mean, I can trace, but apparently when it comes to those letters, a little bit too difficult. So you'll see here now that I've moved over to the letters, I'm just trying my very best to outline where those words were going to go, so that I could put my colored water slide, my clear water slide, but that is obviously the full colored image over this. So this didn't kind of work in my favor, and I'll show you kind of next how we're going to fix this, but I'm going to finish the rest of the words here to the best of my ability. Some of the smaller words I just kind of drew over, if you will, as long as I thought the word was, hoping that that would help the image show up. Proves that that didn't, but I'm then going to go in with a makeup wedge, and I'm going to fill in the silhouette image of the woman with alcohol ink using that makeup wedge. So that kind of just ties up the rest of this image. What I do after this is I do let this sit for probably a good 1 to 2 hours. I think I let this sit and let the alcohol ink dry. I wanted to make sure that everything was completely, and I mean completely dry to the touch, completely dry, wasn't going to move, because what I am going to do is we're going to epoxy this to get a nice, again, layer over this image before I apply the second water slide, which you'll see in the next clip. I don't show any of the epoxying in this video, and it's because this video was already so long as it is. You guys have seen me epoxy before. I am going to be doing a video coming up soon of just mixing epoxy, and talk about some of the epoxies that I've worked with and had most success with. Again, my own opinions. But I didn't really feel like you guys needed to see me epoxy. I will link another video that does kind of go a little bit more in depth with that. So my epoxy coat has dried. I did just use Aluminite Quick Coat, which I did for actually the majority of this. So I'm going to speed through this because, again, now all we're doing is we're applying the image, the colored image, on top of this white spot that I've created here. So again, we're doing the same thing we did with that gray image, and we are going to let our water slide sit in the water, again, room temperature water, until it slides completely off the back without any issue. I'm going to hold the top, and then very carefully I'm going to slide that backing out from below it. So now I'm just trying to measure up and match up very as close as I can to make sure that the image is over the colored white background that I put there. And this is kind of where I looked and realized my mistake. So the image and silhouette of the woman came out great. The words, because I couldn't get a fine enough brush in there to make each individual letter, it just looked super messy and just didn't come out the way that I wanted. So we had to fix this, and here's how we're going to fix it. So I've let my water slide sit for an hour. I did another thin coat of epoxy, and then what we're going to do is we are going to again go over the words only, and we're going to cover it up with a couple of things. Using just some craft paint from Walmart, we're going to take just some cotton pads that, again, I got right from the dollar store, really inexpensive, and we're just going to cover up the words with the acrylic paint. So again, I'm only going over kind of the words, and I'm creating kind of what will look like a cloud behind her at first, which then I'm able to, with the help of some alcohol inks, I'm able to kind of transform into more of a wave look. The quote on here is, "Into the ocean I go to lose myself and find my soul," and it's just kind of a great opportunity I felt since I had made this kind of big boo-boo to correct my mistake and incorporate kind of a wave of the ocean behind her. So I am going to use both Glacier and Aquamarine to create my wave colors behind her, and you are going to see that I'm going to go and take that craft paint all the way to the edge of the alcohol ink colors on the other side, because I want it to kind of, the wave to almost look like it is right on her back, kind of right overwhelming her and kind of almost taking over, kind of almost crashing over her. So I'm going to start with the Aquamarine and then go over with the Glacier on the white acrylic paint, just to create kind of a depth of color on top of this white acrylic paint. And I fill in any spots that are directly behind her, and any spots and imperfections of the white acrylic paint you can see under the image, and try and cover those with the alcohol inks as well, to kind of just make it look like it was meant, this wave was always meant to be there, and that it was part of the image altogether. So we are going to put the words back on this image, but instead of using the water slide like I had originally planned, we're just going to print and create those words again in white vinyl and place those over top of that. I am going to go in with purple, which I believe was Amethyst, and I'm going to use that Amethyst color to create a deeper depth at the bottom part of the wave, to kind of represent the deep dark depths of the ocean, and again create that gradient, kind of very similar to the gradient that is behind this image in the acrylic paint. And so right now I'm just trying to cover up, though, any of those white spots again that were used for the alcohol ink under this clear water slide image, in order to make it a more cohesive look altogether. All right, so now we're going to apply decals. I got this I Am a Woman SVG from Etsy, which I will link in the description below. I just printed this and kind of stretched out the image so that it fit in the middle of the alcohol ink side of the cup. I believe that the width of it is about 3 1/4, so 3.25, and then I stretched it to, I think, almost 5 inches. It's a little less than 5. I think it's 4.45, because I wanted it to take up the majority of that back side without it looking distorted. So I'm going to apply this image in white vinyl to the cup using the hinge method, as I've shown you before. So I'm just measuring and make sure that it looks, again, to my eye, looks even enough to apply. And then I'm going to pull back that backing, and then very tight and taut, I'm going to pull from the middle all the way over to the edge, and then smooth out accordingly before I remove the transfer tape on top. Now we're going to flip the cup over and go onto the other side. So I will tell you that I didn't put a coat of epoxy on this side after I did the alcohol ink, because it was just such a small amount of vinyl. I didn't feel like I would have any issues getting this vinyl on here and damaging the alcohol inks under it. I did let it dry for a good while, so probably a few hours, this might even be the next day, before I attempted to apply the vinyl, and did do one coat of clear gloss spray just to make sure that I didn't damage it. So I'm just going to apply this decal directly over where the word placement was before, so it covers up any of the letters that I couldn't cover up with the alcohol ink. And so I'm just going to apply that again, the hinge method, and then remove the transfer tape on this image before moving on to the next step before we get into final coats of epoxy. I've applied one coat of epoxy, and now I'm going to tape off the bottom and cover this up so that I can spray paint that bottom with the Midnight Blue Satin Gloss Spray. Once the bottom has completely dried, I'm going to remove that blue painter's tape so that we can move into the pinstripe lines before final coats of epoxy. Now we're going to move on to applying our stripes. I've just printed off my Cricut 2 lines in white vinyl. They are 0.15 in width and in length they are 11 inches. So I'm just going to apply these to the split part of the tumbler, so where both the acrylic paint and the alcohol ink meet. I'm not going to carry the pinstripe or the strip all the way through the bottom. I'm actually going to cut off where it meets that midnight blue color on the bottom to kind of give it a better cohesive look. I had thought about adding glitter, but kind of decided that I liked just the alcohol ink and the acrylic paint look and didn't want to add any sparkle to this cup. So left the bottom completely that midnight blue color and then just decided to go into my pinstripes or my striping so that I could do another final coat and then it be completely finished. So you're going to see and notice that I didn't put any sanding in the video as well because this was mostly alcohol ink and acrylic paint, and because there wasn't anything like glitter or anything that would cause any kind of bumps or anything, the only sanding that I did need to do was at that top rim, and so I didn't actually do my sanding until right before I put this pinstripe on. So this cup took one more final coat before it was completely finished. I am absolutely pleased and surprised with how pretty this cup came out. It is just absolutely gorgeous, and I love that the Arteza paints really gave this an extra vibe and look. I hope you enjoyed today's video. It was a fun one to make. If you haven't already, follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll see you again next week. Bye, guys.